Ladies and gentlemen, just before we start another episode of the Fitzness Academy podcast, just a reminder for those who are listening on YouTube that we are now on Spotify. So please head down into the link in the description and check us out there. On with the episode.
One thing I can really put my name on and understand is ownership. Because throughout my career and every day, and you go those lone spells or when I was younger, if I won't make it to anywhere, to any level, it's on me. You know, all these circumstances for sure play a role, but the bottom line is me. Am I going to work? Am I going to fight? Am I going to put in the time and effort? Am I going to take those setbacks, take them on the chin? Or am I going to let them, flatten me on the floor?
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Fitzness Academy podcast. This is by far the biggest one we've ever had so far, ladies and gents. Asmir Begović, thank you very, very much for coming on. I'm a bit lost of words, so I'm not actually going to say too much. I'm going to let Asmir take over for sure, but obviously current Everton goalkeeper. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure.
No worries at all. So, I don't know if you've watched any other podcasts so far. I don't blame you if you're not, by the way. But I always throw everyone in the deep end straight away with an icebreaker question. Now, goalkeepers are known for their superstitions. Let's be polite in that sense, because my best friend is a goalkeeper. Do you have any weird superstitions before you play? Do you have any routines that you stick by to the millimeter and no one can break them?
Well, I think I'm going to be one of the more normal goalkeepers you're going to meet. So I think that's quite good. Hope that plays in my favor. But no crazy superstitions at all. Actually, I guess many years ago I realized, the simpler your routine, your pre-match preparations and everything are, I think the better it is. So I keep it quite simple. About an hour before kickoff, I really go into the zone and worry about my work, and that's really where it goes. So no putting my boot on one foot instead of the other, making sure it's the same one, or my glove on. So no, it's a fairly standard routine, really, nothing special. So I'm very sorry to disappoint.
Oh, I was hoping for some weird and wacky one that you had to put one tape on one finger, then half that size of one tape on the opposite finger. But it's okay. It's okay. I'll accept it and we'll move on. That's perfectly fine. So, obviously, I've been the absolute creep and done the biggest amount of research on yourself, obviously, apart from the obviously brilliant attributes that you've had already. So I have got a rough detail, or quite an in-depth detail as to your journey. But for the listeners who don't quite know of yourself, do you mind giving us a rough outline as to your journey, and then we'll obviously delve into little bits in between?
Yeah, my journey's been quite a complex one, really. I was born in Bosnia, 1987, and soon after that, things got pretty exciting. I mean, I wouldn't say exciting, but adventurous. Anyway, the conflict, the war started, and my family made a decision to move away from Bosnia and pursue life opportunities somewhere else. And we tried a couple of other countries, but we ended up settling in Germany, where we stayed for 6 years, and then things stood out of our they were out of our control and out of our hands. We were forced to move again, and this time we ended up moving to Canada. So in the space of my first 10 years, I've moved to do 2 different countries. I've moved continents, and it was a pretty crazy upbringing, really, for sure. And it was what it was. I guess all you can do is try and make the best out of it, and we went from there. So spent 6 years in Canada, and then I had the opportunity to come over to England and pursue my dream, which was to be a professional goalkeeper. And very lucky that for almost the last 20 years I've been pretty much in England and living my dream.
That's quite an already in-depth detail, and we haven't even got into the journey in the UK. But I wanna speak to you about your time in Canada first, because a lot of people would see nowadays, and seeing that you've obviously represented Bosnia quite a few times now. I think it was something like 63 times or something like that. Something that I read. So it's quite a a big transition there. What was it like having to sort of leave home so early? Obviously, I understand you were quite young at the time, but then having to move to a completely different culture twice, or actually 3 times, then moving to the UK, isn't it? So was it a big sort of change for you, maybe both professionally, like in your career-wise? Obviously, I understand you were very, very young, but was it a lot for yourself, just aside from football?
Yeah, really, quite a lot. I mean, I guess, as I said, my life story sort of made me grow up and mature above my years at an early age, really. So I was able to handle it. But, from about the age of 13, 14, I started traveling the world. I started getting picked for regional select teams, the national team, the Canadian youth national teams. And that's how my journey started. So I had to grow up very, very quickly. And, from those early ages, things took off. And, I had to deal with things that were probably beyond my years. But that's the way these things come. You can't predict them. You can't plan them. You just have to make the best of them as they come, as and when they come. And I had to deal with the choice of which country do I represent. No one prepares you really for these decisions. Not many people can help you with it. So again, you try and handle it the best way you can, but probably it never gets dealt with in a perfect way. So yeah, absolutely, a lot of things came my way and something I had to deal with. But those are all experiences that helped mold me into the person I am today.
And speaking of sort of those experiences, I obviously I did the basic background check, and then and then obviously saw quite an interesting interview on TalkSport you did, that obviously you came to the UK and you could have either signed for Tottenham or Portsmouth, and you obviously had trials at Portsmouth first, and then they liked you straight away. Was it 2 days or something like that? And then you couldn't go to Tottenham. So what was it like then going obviously to a club like, and it's fair to say I think back in that time was definitely up there with one of the better teams in English football, no?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, nothing ever happens pretty straightforward for myself.
No.
So I think 2003 when I was 16, that's when my opportunity to come to England came. As you rightly said, I had a month-long trial lined up in England, 2 weeks at Portsmouth, 2 weeks at Spurs. Me being a bit of a control freak that I am, on my way to, when I was picked up by the academy director in Portsmouth, which was my first stop, I was driven to my digs. And I ended up asking the academy director, I said, so when do I go to Spurs? Which day? I had to know, like, which, was it on the 13th, 14th day? I'm thinking they're all talking to each other. It's all organized. And the academy director he was an incredible gentleman, David Hurst. I owe so much to him. I said, what do you mean what about Spurs? So, my alarm bell started ringing. I said, well, I was told that I'm spending 2 weeks here and then 2 weeks with Tottenham. And he's like, oh, I don't know anything about that. Let me check. So I put my foot in it right away, which wasn't ideal. But then, as you said, I go into training the next day. I do really, really well. The second day was a play friendly match, and I do really, really well. And then I was pulled aside by the academy director and the academy coach and said, listen, we want to offer you a contract, a youth and a professional contract. And this was when Portsmouth had just been promoted to the Premier League, 2003. So Harry Redknapp was a manager and had some really big players. And I didn't know where Portsmouth was, but I was like living my dream. I was like, what a place this is. And we want to offer you this contract, but under one condition, and that means you can't go to Spurs. So, I'm like, okay, I'm a kid from Canada, come all this way. These people offer me a contract, and I said, fine. Let me talk to my family, and I'll come back to you. And, I got back to them, I think, later that night or the next day, and accepted the contract. There was a verbal agreement, and off we went from there. So I guess it was a big decision at the time, which I didn't realize, but one that worked out pretty well.
Yeah, and it was a bit tricky, wasn't it? Because I read something that you couldn't obtain your UK visa just yet, so it was, you weren't able to sort of play sort of in, was it at all, or was it with sort of in the first team ranks?
Yeah, I couldn't play in first team ranks. I couldn't. Well, I was
okay.
I was a student scholar.
Yeah,
and
scholar. Yeah.
The Canadian British link was that you can come in on a student visa and you can do your studies, which I did some extra studies, which was perfect for my parents and everyone. but I was playing all the academy matches, which was perfect for my development anyway. But I was probably ready to dip my feet into the reserves and those sort of ranks, but I couldn't. Unfortunately, in games you had to pay to play. I couldn't participate, but that was okay. I spent 2 years playing in the academy, and then I turned professional after that.
Yeah, and then obviously before that, you had a couple of loan spells, wasn't it? I think before you had a loan spell in Belgium. I'm gonna absolutely butcher this, but La Louvain.
Not bad.
And then, thank you. It's a French lesson. Belgium French lesson and obviously goalkeeping lesson all in one, ladies and gents. So you're getting a bit of everything. And then obviously when you finally got it, you went to Macclesfield as well. So. We'll move on to sort of each of the loans in a little bit, because I'm a big advocate of the loan system, and we can discuss it a little bit more in a second. But how important were those for you, even though you had got your sort of UK visa and you were ready to sort of play with the reserves in the first team? How important were those early on?
Well, yeah, I mean, that came, again, to take you back and give you more insight to the situations. I turned 18. Student visa expires. You need to become a professional player. As on a professional contract, you need different work permits and everything else. And again, the system changed, it's an ever-flowing system. I mean, if you look at now with Brexit and everything, whether I couldn't get a work permit, I could be registered to Portsmouth, but I couldn't actually work there, which meant I couldn't play for the first team or anyone. And they said, well, we got to loan you out for a year. You can be registered, but we got to loan you out for a year. And then hopefully after a year, you'll be able to get your work permit. So I'm like, where am I going to go? And then, someone said, oh, go to Belgium, go to La Louvière. I have no idea where La Louvière is. But as you do, and you go, and next thing you know, you're 18 years old living on your own in Belgium, some town. You're thinking, like, what in the world's going on here? So I go there, the club very much in the last, now it's 12 months, pretty much vanishes. That the president was charged with match fixing and all sorts of different things. And, it goes down as another big experience. I think I played 2 first-team games. Yes. Probably a wasted year in some terms, in the footballing side of things, but not in terms of my development as a person, because those are character-building type of experiences. And then when I did come back to the UK, I was more ready to face the music and really take it on from there. So, every single loan spell served a purpose in their own way.
And what about your time? And I'm a big fan of David James, obviously, with a lot of his work in football, and obviously now in puntry a little bit. So what was it like, sort of being such a young goalkeeper and having that experience with him at Portsmouth? Because I can imagine that, and I'm quite that type of person. If I see someone more experienced than me or wiser than me, I'm always there and I'm chewing their ear off 24/7 or as long as I've got with him. Was that the case with yourself?
Well, yeah, yes and no. Going back to my time at Portsmouth, I mean, again, you're like a sponge in one way. Absolutely. Like, I remember being in the academy and we had Shaka Hislop, who was the club number 1, and I still speak to him today. Great respect. Wow. But you're also competing, right? And then I come back from Belgium and Dean Kiley's in the first team, and someone I hit off right from there. And he takes me under his wing, and I learn a lot from him about what it means to be a professional. So we're friends and everything, but at the same time, we're competing, right? And that was all set up by our goalkeeper coach, who was David Coles at the time. We had an incredible group, guys who got on. Everyone really got on, understood each other, and got on well with each other. But at the same time, we competed like crazy, and we went at it and, try and get that number 1 spot. And then David James came in. And David James, big name, big personality, obviously a big profile, and an unbelievable guy and goalkeeper. I mean, he was a physical specimen. And he did some things and came in, I think, 1 player of the year. I mean, he was just incredible, even at that time when he was 35, 36, I believe. So as much as I'm a young guy at that time, and I'm just 18, 19, 20, whatever I was in those years, I'm thinking, yeah, I've got to learn from this guy. I don't think he's really open to teaching me, so I couldn't really pick his brain, but I'm also there to compete, and I want to beat this guy, So if we're doing a running drill, we're doing anything, I want to take him on, I want to be better. And he saw that. He saw this young guy at his heels, I think that obviously pushed him. But eventually, 2 or 3 years later, I overtook him. And that was always the goal. So as much as you want to learn from these guys and everything else, it's an industry and it's business where only one can play and only one can win.
And I'm going to jump ahead here because I want to leave this to the last bit because it was my most interesting point, was that without anyone realizing, you've probably come up against some of which are sort of one of the best sort of in each sort of position when you've come to each and every one of your clubs. So obviously at Portsmouth, you had David James there, and obviously Ilsop, that you mentioned, was number one at the time. You obviously went to Chelsea for a couple of years, I think, or 2 or 3 years it was, and then obviously had Thibaut Courtois there. Obviously now is at Real Madrid. AC Milan, Gigi Donnarumma, and then Everton, Jordan Pickford. Obviously England's number one at the moment. So you've thrown yourself into a massive challenge with with a lot of the clubs that you've been into. So is that something that almost gives you a little bit of sort of hunger to try and go to these different clubs? Because I think it's all well and good saying, oh well, yeah, these people want me and I really sort of want to compete, but then having almost the best goalkeeper in the world at that time, at each of the times that you've been at that club, does that almost help you work harder and help you does it motivate you more?
Absolutely it does. I mean, you've nailed it on the head there, and it's something that drives me to this day. Is when I look back, through my teenage years and into my early professional years and all that kind of stuff, it's that competing. It's the competing, it's delusional at times for sure, but we have to be to achieve anything. I think you have to be a little bit delusional, and then it's competing. That's what drives you to get better. That's what keeps you at a high level. I've never taken the easy route. I've never ever taken an easy route, and
definitely not.
It's never
definitely not. Yeah,
it's never interested me in a weird way, And people say, well, you could go there and be this and that comfortably. Like, no, I've never looked at it. I'm even now looking at it like, I want to compete against England number one. I want to battle with him every day, and in return, that's going to make us both better. And hopefully make the team more successful, which again is the thing you want the most, is for a successful team to win trophies and everything else. But it's that competition that drives us, and drives me, and certainly it's that thing that makes me get out of bed and do extras or whatever, everything else. Because if I didn't have that edge, would I get to a higher level? Would I get to the next level? Would I be at consistently at a high level? I don't think so. Maybe, but it never in my head did I think that was possible. So for me, it's always about competing and taking on the biggest challenge. It's, do you want to go to Chelsea and be one of two and compete with one of the best in the world and win trophies for that club and everything else? Or do you want to go to or stay at a club where you've made a name, you've made a reputation, you're number one, all this kind of stuff? Like, I always wanted to take that next one. And I wanted to see, because I always thought if I didn't do it, I would probably regret it later on.
Yeah, and that's you just probably brought this to mind for me, is the fact that whenever someone sees this big transfer go through, or they see someone big leaving a certain club, they're like, oh well, they've been there for ages, they're being unloyal, or they're being so. It's all about new challenges, because I think for yourselves as players, you spend, obviously, if you look after yourself and like yourself, you spend so much time in the game that you need to keep obviously trying to improve and keep seeing what level is best for you at the end of the day, no?
Exactly right. And listen, of course, there's the odd one. I can think of, like Steven Gerrard or Gary Neville, those guys. Yeah, they were one club, which is top 4, 5, 10 clubs, whatever in the world. So unless you can get in that situation young, there isn't probably a reason for you to move, because there's nowhere better, more difficult, harder to go. The challenge of sustaining that level of success at that club is big enough. So most of us and everyone else is always working and competing to get to that level. So unless you're at that level, then obviously you have to work incredibly hard to stay there. So,
and then,
yeah, it's difficult. It's obviously that's the only other side of things where you can potentially look at it.
And then sort of how hard was it then to sort of, your longest spells were probably at Portsmouth, and then again at Bournemouth when you went back, because obviously you were loaned, weren't you, when you were at sort of Portsmouth when you were very, very young. Going back to obviously those clubs and spending a decent amount of time there, I think it was like 4 years at Portsmouth, or plus obviously the junior age group, and then on to Bournemouth, and then onto Stoke, is it difficult sort of leaving a club where you have mentioned sort of building that reputation? Because it almost may seem like a bit of like, oh, what have I done here? I almost need to start from ground zero. But like, was it that way for you, or did you always focus on that new challenge?
Well, again, always different circumstances, right? So when I left Portsmouth for Stoke, I was always looking to progress, and that move probably came a bit earlier than I thought it would. But that was, again, due to circumstances out of my control. Portsmouth were in huge financial trouble, and they had to sell off any half-decent assets they had to try and survive, which they still didn't do it. But, so I was always looking, at that time in Portsmouth, it happened very quickly. I was looking, how do I get into this first team? How do I stay in that first team? How do I play Premier League football on a consistent level? And then, of course, how can I go and compete against the best and go to a bigger club and do all that kind of stuff? That came a little bit quicker. Within 3-4 months, I was playing in Portsmouth first team. I was alone at Ipswich, then I went to Portsmouth first team. I overtook David James. I stayed and I played and I did well. And then that January, I was on the block to be sold. So would I have liked maybe another few months or another year, of course, to develop in an ideal world? Yeah, sure. But, that opportunity came, and then you have to choose, okay, what's the next challenge? And that challenge for me was Stoke. And again, going in, having to compete with Thomas Sorensen, was, the very high-level international goalkeeper. You go and make the best out of it, and of course, I take that challenge on, and I would take him in a few months' time. So you can't always be prepared, and those challenges come. And then the same with Stoke. Of course, the present and main interest is, well, I've got to do well for Stoke. I've got to keep building. I've got to get better. I've got to do this. But then can I get to that top 4, top 6, top 7 club and really challenge myself against the best every single day, compete for trophies, win things, because that's the stuff you look back on after your career, and go from there. When is that going to come? There was a couple of shouts, a couple of opportunities, didn't happen for many different reasons. And then the Chelsea opportunity came in 2015. Again, not a perfect situation, but those situations don't arise every single day. Not a perfect one. The fact is, you want to maybe go in as a undisputed number 1. But then I'm like, well, you know what? Let's try. Let's see what happens. And then I'm playing quite a lot of games for Chelsea, actually, in that time. And, we won a title and unfortunately lost a couple, 2 or 3 finals. But, you take them as they come. But, of course, there's always the present goal, of course, to do your best for whoever you're playing for. And then always trying to push yourself to try and take that next step.
So then looking back on all those sort of, whether it's the 8 or so loan spells that you had, which obviously seems like a lot before we breaking it down, and then obviously where you're at the moment at Everton, obviously competing in the Premier League, which is unbelievable. How can you look back and say, I regret this bit, or sort of maybe not regret, but sort of you look back on that time and you wish something went that certain way? Because like you said, you try not to live with regret, and I don't think you do. But do you look up? Can you not help yourself and look back and wish, I wish that would have gone slightly differently?
No major regrets. No major regrets for sure. You always try and listen, no one hands you a handbook and says to you, this is how the next 10, 15 years are going to go. So all you can ever do is in that time and moment, make the best possible decision and educate it as much as possible and do whatever you can. And in general, I've always thought I've done it for the right reasons, and I've always done my best. Maybe the one where I think back now, and again, I think again for the right reasons at the time, maybe I left Chelsea a little bit early. Maybe I left Chelsea just a little bit early, because, okay, now I've gotten back to Everton, I went to AC Milan. But to be at the top, as we are now, is not easy to always get to. So I thought maybe I left after 2 years was a little bit early. Maybe I could have done another year and saw what else I could have done, how much more I could have achieved, and what else we could have won. That was maybe the one where I just went a little bit too fast. But then in return, it can't be a regret. And as I say, I have no major regrets, because I go into Bournemouth and I play over 100 games for a club in the Premier League, in the Championship. I got Player of the Year. Spent the best part of 4 years on and off there, and had a great time. So, like I said, no major regrets. It was just maybe the one where I thought could I stay one more year and see what would have happened.
And scored the most unbelievable goal I've ever seen in my life. I cannot unfortunately include it for copyright, but I'll try and include like a snapshot or something. That was unbelievable. And you said it was unfortunate, but I reckon it was there. It was in the lock anyway.
Thank you. That was a good moment.
So anyway, again, progressing on a little bit, because this was one thing that I wanted to include for a decent amount of the episode, because I think it was an unbelievable initiative when I looked at it. And we're going to go on to all of them, because you're doing a hell of a lot of stuff outside of football. So obviously the Asmir Begović Foundation, the Asmir Begović Academy, your AB1 goalkeeping, the glove brand, and obviously the glove bank. So starting us off with the foundation, do you want to give us a little insight into your foundation first and foremost, and we can go through them all?
Yeah, absolutely. I set up the charity just under 9 years ago now. Was always passionate about giving back. Of course, when you come from Bosnia, you understand that there's less privileged people and there's difficult situations that I have to deal with. So I was always passionate about giving back. Always passionate about helping out and getting involved in the local community. And then I, got to a stage where I was thinking, well, I was helping these different things and causes, but I'm like, where exactly are we helping, or are we sure that our support is going where it needs to go? So I said, you know what, I put it in my own hands and start my own charity and focus on supporting facilities and seeing how we can make a difference. So we set that up 9 years ago. We've had a really good run so far. It's come through a difficult time with pandemics, but we've done some really good things in the UK and abroad, especially back home in Bosnia. And how much longer we'll keep it going, and we'll see. That I've never put, a deadline on it or a time frame. It's one of those things. Let's see how we can go and how good it can be, and we'll take it from there. So the charity's been almost going 9 years, and we've done some really good things.
And then obviously, by the way, before we move on to the next one, I'm going to include all the links in the description to obviously the every single website, and then every single sort of support link that you can obviously donate to and things like that. So moving on to your academy, sort of that's an interesting one, because obviously having so much experience, I suppose all you want to do is just sort of show your support and show your sort of experience to the next generation of goalkeepers, no?
Well, 100%, and I think my academies, my goalkeeper academies, and my goalkeeping brand, they go hand to hand really, because one doesn't work without the other really. As we talked about earlier, very passionate about football and goalkeeping for my whole life. That's all I've ever known. That's all I've ever really been a part of. My dad used to be one, my granddad. So that's me. That's where I really know everything, or a lot, not everything, but I know a lot. And we about 4 or 5 years ago, we started to do these summer camps, especially back home. We started to do some goalkeeper camps in the summer, which, lots of kids came, and we could have done more and more, but obviously you're confined by space and time and everything. And then once you start that, people want more. Then you start a regular training, which becomes an academy. And then, of course, people look for product. How can I wear gloves and everything else? And then that starts off the brand. So AB1GK really is a layer of many things, but all is connected very much to each other. And that's how we started it. And it's you know what, James, it's grown exponentially, and it's grown a lot more than I could have ever imagined. Yeah. It's grown faster than I could have ever imagined. So trying to keep up with the growth and demand for the brand, which is a great thing, is also not an easy thing. So we've done our best, and I think we're getting stronger and stronger all the time.
And you speak about sort of exponential growth. I mean, talk about a small place like Bosnia. You're obviously AB1's reached obviously Gibraltar, sponsoring also our number one national team goalkeeper Dale Coling. So obviously unbelievable to see that. It's hopefully, fingers crossed, everyone gets behind that, which is amazing. And how did that come about in terms of? Was it just sort of trying to sort of get the brand out there, or was it for yourself being like, I like this about one glove, but I don't like this, and I want to make a glove now which I like and everyone else could like as well?
Well, it started off two ways really. Like I said, my academy camp and academy project was really the main factor in starting the brand, because when I go back a few years ago now, my first academy location was back home in Bosnia, and kids and everyone would say, well, we want to be in the academy, but we also need good gloves. So I'm like, well, what do you do for gloves at the moment? Mainly we order online. When we have to go in a shop, they're not the top models. They're sort of the knockoffs. We can't get good gloves. So, when we order online, we have to order from abroad. We have to pay customs charges and all this and everything. It becomes quite expensive. So I'm like, okay, interesting. I look at the market. I see some couple smaller brands, which we try to team up with. But then the idea, one of my who still works for me now, my head of operations, said, well, why don't we look into making our own gloves? So I said, interesting. Why don't we? So, I've got a couple of connections with factories. So we ended up getting a couple of samples made from factories in Pakistan, which is where we get our products made. We end up ordering a couple hundred pieces for those kids in Bosnia to work with and buy. And then people started seeing it and it's like, where can we get you gloves? How can we wear them? And so on and so forth. And then that led us to really thinking, well, is there a market for this? Is there a market for it? And then when we looked at the market, we saw a gap. We're the only brand in the world named after a professional goalkeeper. No one else does it. We do it. We had the audacity, the courage, the bravery to do it. And it's worked out ever since. But as I say, it's not been without challenges. It's not been without, without difficulty and the fact that, again, it's things out of your control, pandemics and everything. So we've grown. And, we've got Dale Coling on board, who was one of our first endorsees and liked the product and stuck with it ever since. And obviously he's doing some great things playing for Gibraltar. So it grows one by one, but everything's connected again at the end of the day.
Yeah, and obviously other guys like sort of Tom Heaton at Man United and others like that. So it's unbelievable to see the growth of it as well. So and obviously linking into that, you mentioned sort of the demand for people who unfortunately are less fortunate and cannot get these sorts of gloves. You started the glove bank, which I absolutely love, and I've seen all the work you've done that sort of trying to get as many people sort of to donate or to use old gloves for people who can't. That was an unbelievable one for in my opinion. So can you talk to us a little bit more about that as well?
For sure. And again, when we started the brand, we we looked at layers of obviously growing our brand and how can we continue our impact on the goalkeeping world. And it was actually my wife who came up with the idea of,
wow.
She said, well, why can't you reuse gloves? I said, what do you mean? I said, well, what happens to your gloves that you use but still in good condition? I said, well, I try and hand them down as much as I can, but they probably go to waste. She's like, well, why don't you try and collect those gloves and see what you can do? And that's how we created the glove bank. We then made this initiative. We made this charity where people can send all their used gloves to us, and then we find our partners all over the globe where we can really work with them and get those gloves to children or boys and girls, guys and women who need them and maybe can't, as we know, maybe pay that premium price for a pair of gloves, but still get a good glove. And, it's part of the goalkeeping union, goalkeeping world. And we thought it was a really nice addition for us as a brand.
I guess it just try and help as many people as possible enjoy the love for goalkeeping, isn't it? Because obviously it's all well and good saying, oh, I need a new pair because I've got a little rip there, but then obviously people can actually benefit from using those later on down the line. So that's unbelievable. So helping people on all different sorts of levels, which is unbelievable. So onto the final points, which I'm going to mention because this has gone absolutely rapid. So I need to make sure I get these in. For yourself, do you have any sort of one person or maybe sort of a couple of people who have inspired you, helped you along the way to obviously where you are today?
Oh, gosh, yeah. I mean, a lot of people, first it starts at home, right? I think first it starts at home. I've had an incredibly adventurous childhood and life, and, having the stability of my parents always there. That's important. It could have really gone by the wayside and everything could have split apart and everything else. But no, we always stuck together as a family. And I thought that was always a good solid base for me. Then my inspiration, of course, my family, my kids. You always want to do better and bigger for them and look after them as well as you can. And then I think thirdly, of course, I've been raised or you get inspired by people around the world. I'm inspired by greatness. Can I learn something from Tom Brady? Can I learn something from LeBron James? Can I learn something from Warren Buffett, whoever it may be?
So outside of football as well?
Of course. You can take inspiration from everywhere. And there's probably some key principles that everyone goes back to, but then you always try and find something. And what do they do? Why are they so successful? So we're always, I think, looking for options and different things, and it's ways of getting better and learning and evolving. So different inspirations all the time. Absolutely.
That's fantastic, because then obviously that's one thing which I try and do as well, because even if it's like, even from yourself, I've learned today from you, even though, things happen, you still got to try your best, or even if it's the lone spells, a lot of things have unfortunately gone against you, but you're here where you are today. So, I've learned that for sure. And, even if it's sort of other people who aren't in sports, I think I'm obviously involved in sport like yourself. So it's important to sort of look at that, isn't it?
And James, listen, if there's one thing I can really put my name on and understand is ownership. Because throughout my career and every day, and you go those lone spells of when I was younger, if I won't make it to anywhere, to any level, it's on me. All these circumstances for sure play a role, but the bottom line is me. Am I going to work? Am I going to fight? Am I going to put in the time and effort? Am I going to take those setbacks, take them on the chin, or am I going to let them, flatten me on the floor? And it's the same in the sports world, same in the private world, and it's same in the business world. It comes back to me, because if you don't care, if you don't take ownership of yourself and your journey and your path, then no one else is going to care. At the same time, no one should ever care more than you. So ownership of whatever you do, everything, every single day, it's all on you. So you can look all you want, this guy likes me, doesn't like me, didn't give me this opportunity. Maybe they didn't, but you go to the next one. One door closes, next one opens. So it's all about continuing, taking ownership of your own path and your own way.
And then sort of what was your advice for them people about those opportunities? Because I know I'm a big believer that if sort of an opportunity doesn't come knocking, you need to create the door yourself, and you have to create that opportunity. So is that another point as well?
Absolutely. I mean, and within that, don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid of rejection. I mean, James, you know it. You have to ask. You have to try and get. You have to open up doors, and a lot of them will slam back in your face. Mm-hmm. Some will open up a little bit, and you got to fight your way through it. You got to do what you got to do, and then other ones will open wide open. So you can't be afraid of rejection. I mean, I've gone on loan spell. Like I said, when I was younger, I went on loan spells that didn't work. It wasn't the right situation. I didn't play well, whatever. People didn't believe in me. You move on to the next one. You can't let those define you. We'd look in the business. How many trade customers, everyone have we tried to get a product into? Some have said no. Is that going to stop us from asking everyone else, continuing to develop our product or brand? It can't. It can't. Not. If it does, then we shouldn't be doing it. So all you can do is push all the time.
What an amazing piece of advice. I was going to ask what your next piece of advice is, but you've already jumped the gun there. So you've done a brilliant job there. So now, ladies and gentlemen, what a way to finish the episode. And like Asmir said, it was a unbelievable way that this came about. So I thank you so much for your time and your opportunity. Obviously, incredibly busy, as you can imagine. He's a little bit busy. He's got a little bit on. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
James, thank you. Thank you once again for the opportunity to be here with you today. Let's keep in touch and wish you all the best.
No worries. So obviously, and by the way, ladies and gents, all the links to everything in the description below, to all his to the foundation, to the academy, to AB1, obviously the glove bank as well. So thanks very much, guys.